You guys. So yeah, my name is Eben Upton. I run a thing based in the UK called the Raspberry Pi Foundation. We make little computers for kids. Now, normally I try to avoid inflicting death by PowerPoint on people, but we were so close. Yesterday was Pi Day, so I really couldn't resist doing a moderately. What are we going to do here?
We need your laptop on 1024 by 768. You're on 800 by 600.
Damnation. This wouldn't have happened with the Raspberry Pi. Windows 7. What do I do? I'm scared. There will be a short pause. Possibly a long pause. Let's have a look. See, so it's thinking 10 by 7. Can you toggle it to the main screen and see what happens?
It's good. Good.
Is it good? We're good. Outstanding. And back to the presentation. So, so I couldn't resist doing a moderately Pi themed talk, themed around everyone's favorite irrational number. So what I'm going to try and do. I'll start off by talking about one. I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes about what Raspberry Pi is. It's like one big story. What Raspberry Pi is, why we're doing it. For me, Raspberry Pi has been about a 7-year journey now, starting with my time as what we call a Director of Studies at the University in Cambridge. Now, the role of a Director of Studies is to organize the undergraduate teaching for a subject at one of our 30 colleges. And also to ensure a supply of undergraduates in the future. So every December, we get a lot of high school students come in, or used to be a lot of high school students, come in to apply for our places on our course. Now, when I went to Cambridge in 1996, we had a fairly typical oversubscription ratio of about 6 to 1. So in order to get a place on the computer science tripos, you had to beat your way through, you had to beat out 5 other guys. And those 5 other guys, they were often people who had a very, very deep level of understanding of what computers did. These are people who had been programming maybe since they were 10, people who'd had their Commodore 64s or their Timexes, or in the UK, machines like the BBC microcomputer, which is certainly what I grew up with. These are people who maybe had bought these machines as children to play computer games on, or they'd been bought these machines by their parents to do their schoolwork on. But all of these machines had one thing in common, and that was that when you turned them on, they went beep, well mine went beep, and they gave you a programming prompt. And the first thing you had to do, if you wanted to play games on these machines, or you wanted to start a word processor and do your schoolwork, the first thing you had to choose to do was to choose not to program the computer. And what this meant was that everybody of my age in the UK who had any aptitude for computing or any interest in computing had a chance to discover that they had that interest, and they had a platform generally in their bedrooms that they could hack on for many hours a night that they could use to develop those skills. And what this meant was that virtually everybody I knew at school at least knew how to write these, that 2-line program, 10 print I am the best, 20 go to 10, or something a lot filthier, and then to go into the local computer store and type it into all of the machines, and then hit enter on all of the machines and run out of the door. It was a simpler time in the 1980s. You know, we used to make our own entertainment. And the upshot of this was that, you know, the university in Cambridge, we'd got fat and happy on this stream of incredibly intelligent, incredibly talented kids who came in the door at the age of 18. The Cambridge course is fairly famous for having very short terms. You know, the better the university in the UK, the less time you actually spend there. What this means is over the course of 3 years, we have 60 weeks of contact time to turn you from a high school student into somebody who can start an English 3-year PhD program. That meant it was extremely useful to us to be able to rely on a certain level of ability and a certain level of knowledge when people came in the door. And in fact, the first thing we had to do with a lot of these kids was to convince them that they didn't know everything. We had a fantastic tool called functional programming, standard ML, for doing this. Language wars. And so we'd beat these kids, and I was one of these kids, the kids we'd beaten over the head for the first 8 weeks of this course. And when they're lying on the floor whimpering, then, you know, we can then start to teach them the things they need to know. Now, by the time people absolutely need to know functional programming. So we, by the time I was, I went through the PhD program, and by the time I was interviewing people in 2005, the picture had changed radically. So we'd gone from having 500 applicants for our 80 or 90 places to having more like 200 to 250. And while that's still a reasonable ratio, it was starting to get a little bit slim. It was starting to look like we might not be able to find our 80 or 90 kids. And while we were still able, and to this day we can find 80 or 90 people to come and study on the course who are every bit as intelligent as those people were back in the mid-1990s, what they lack these days is they lack that built-in kind of hacker knowledge of what the machine is doing. So we have to spend quite a lot of the start of our 60 weeks building these people up to a level that we'd previously been able to assume. So back in 2006, a group of us at the university started to wonder why this had happened, and we started to wonder if there was anything we could do about it. And the theory that we came up with was that what had happened was those 8-bit machines that we all had as children had gone away. That ecosystem had been eaten from below by games consoles. Games consoles are not only not programmable, they are designed to not be programmable. Their business model forces them to be unprogrammable pieces of hardware because the platform holder needs to recover the subsidy that they've applied to the platform. And then they've been eaten from above by the PC. Now the PC is an awesomely programmable piece of hardware. It's, as a programming environment, far more sophisticated and user-friendly than the machines that we were used to in the 1980s. But what had changed was the choice architecture. What had changed was if you get a PC, you have to choose to program the PC. You have to choose to go and get the tools. You have to choose to go and get the documentation. And that's a tiny little energy barrier. But it's a big enough energy barrier that it just chopped the legs off our pipeline of skilled applicants. So we thought, well, there's a niche. Maybe we can make a thing to fit in this niche. And we had an idea that the thing to fit in this niche in kids' bedrooms had to be 4 things. First of all, it had to be programmable to be of any use to us. Secondly, it had to be interesting. We had to remember that kids were buying these machines in the 1980s. I bought my machine in the 1980s to play, I bought my computer program on, but a lot of people bought their computers in order to play games on or do their schoolwork on. So it had to be able to do something else. It had to not just be a programming device. And for us, what that meant, interesting meant games, interesting meant graphics, interesting meant video. It had to be robust. We wanted something that was small and robust, something that could be shoved into a school bag and taken out of a school bag 100 times and not break. And finally, we wanted to have something which was cheap. Now, we were aware that we were going to be asking people to go and buy a particular piece of hardware in order to get this programming experience, therefore we just could not make it expensive. We looked around and our idea of cheap was, well, a school textbook. You can ask children to buy school textbooks. Now, that just shows, so we picked this $25 price, which shows that we know nothing about what textbooks cost. I think if we had had a more accurate understanding of what textbooks cost, then we would have had a much easier job of the engineering over the following few years. And so we set to, and pretty much this $25 came before anything else. So $25 is the price of the cheapest Raspberry Pi, of what we call the Model A Raspberry Pi. $25 came before pretty much anything else. And we've spent a long time playing around trying to find out what we could fit into $25. And the first things that we were building were very, very similar to Arduinos, which I'm sure lots of people in the room have used, based on microcontrollers. You can get a really nice, you can actually trick a microcontroller into driving an old standard definition television. So you can get a really nice sort of 8-bit microcomputer experience out of an Atmega microcontroller. But this failed a number of our tests. And the lovely thing about this was, and I built one of these myself, the lovely thing about these platforms is that you can build them yourself on Veroboard. You know, you can sit down on a rainy afternoon, at the end of the afternoon you walk away with a computer. And it certainly meets the $25 goal. What it doesn't meet is this requirement that it should be interesting to children. Right, it's interesting to me, because I already know how to program and I like, geeky toys. But it has to be interesting to children. So we kind of abandoned that idea. But about this time, I went to work for a company called Broadcom, and in fact, I'm still a salaried employee of Broadcom, although I spend most of my time doing this sort of thing now. Well, I went to work for a company called Broadcom. Broadcom makes a lot of different chips for communication stuff, and one of the things that we make is chips for cell phones. And it turns out, I was struck by, and these cost about the same as microcontrollers, and I was struck that if you are a cell phone company, what your $10 will buy you is very different from what your $10 will buy you if you go to DigiKey in the way of processing capability. And so this group of us, we started to look and we started to see whether we could build something on one of these platforms. In about 2008, we had in our hands, based on a mobile phone graphics processor that we developed in Cambridge, we had a device which we thought was almost good enough. This was a device which didn't have an open processor. It had a closed proprietary RISC core on it. But we ported CPython to it. And so we had the thing that we thought we wanted all along, which was a machine that booted into a widely known, popular educational programming language, in this case Python. And this thing just looked great. It hit our $25 price point. It could play 720p video. It had a nice, powerful graphics processor on it. We'd arranged Python bindings for all of these features. It was a really fantastic little platform. And we really thought this was a go. And so this group of us who'd been doing this informally got together and we said, well, let's set up a foundation to promote this. And we kicked around a lot of names. We came up with this name Raspberry Pi in the end. The pi in Raspberry Pi is the pi in Python, misspelled. So I've had to defend my spelling for the last 4.5 years. We really thought that pi was going to make for a fantastic logo, and we've never used that possibility. But by the time we realized we weren't going to do that, we'd frozen the name in. So we were trundling along. But one of the problems I think we found was that we had to write everything ourselves. This was a very closed platform. Okay, we'd ported an open, well-known, popular interpretive language onto it, but we had to write everything ourselves. We had to write our own network drivers and our own SD card drivers and all of this stuff. And so it wasn't quite there. And then we were very lucky that a couple of years later, a version of broadly the same chip appeared that I had managed to cram an ARM11 into the corner of. There are advantages to being on the chip design team. We absolutely must have an ARM11 in this chip for unspecified business reasons. And we got this chip back, and it was great. And we finally had the thing that we wanted, which was an almost completely, at least on the ARM side, a completely open platform, something that could run Linux, right? And that would mean that we could leverage this enormous investment that the community had made in developing a real operating system you don't have to pay money for. But we were still thinking in a very parochial way. We still had this very parochial idea that what we were going to try and do was get we don't want another 250 computer science applicants at Cambridge a year. That was our dream. 250 computer science applicants a year. And maybe for the 80 or 90 we let in to know a little bit of assembly language. That would have been a really great outcome. And because we're very nostalgic, I don't know how many of you have come across a machine called the BBC microcomputer. This was the educational microcomputer of choice in the UK in the 1980s, sponsored by the British Broadcasting Corporation. And because a number of us on the board of the foundation had a history with the BBC Micro, and we're kind of like romantic guys, we thought it would be kind of cool to put a BBC sticker on it. We want to call it BBC Nano. We have this lovely brand with Raspberry Pi that we never, ever wanted. And we thought it would be great if we could call this a BBC Nano. We kept going to the BBC and asking them, could we stick your logo on this? And they kept saying no, and there were various complicated legal reasons why they had to say no. And our last attempt was in May of 2011, so nearly 2 years ago. And we went to see a guy called Rory Castle-Jones, who's the senior technology correspondent for the BBC. And we said, hey, can we put the BBC logo on? And he said no. But what he did say then was, well, I think it's a great idea though. Can I take a video of one of you holding up a prototype and talking about the idea? And so one of my colleagues, a guy called David Braben, one of my fellow trustees, who any of you who've played the computer game Elite, who've had your childhoods wasted by Elite, that was David's fault. And there's a 45-second video of him just standing up, holding something that looks nothing like a Raspberry Pi and talking about the Raspberry Pi project. We got 600,000 YouTube views in 2 days. And that was a great 2 days for me. I sat there at Broadcom at work. I didn't do any work. I just sat there pressing F5. I was like you've seen the episode of The Simpsons where Homer gets his console at home and replaces his entire function with one of those nodding birds. And I was just pressing F5. And my how popular are you counter was going up, and I was feeling great. And at the end of the second day, I went home and I was really buzzing, and I sat down opposite my wife Liz. I sat down opposite her, and we had this for dinner, and we had this sudden oh shit moment where we realized we'd promised 600,000 people we'd build them a $25 computer, and we had no idea how to do it. And so we spent a lot of 2011 for me was just like one storm of trying to figure out how we were just going to do it at the price. You add up the cost of the chips and it should be about right. But as soon as you start, there are 180 components on the Raspberry Pi, and 2 of those are the chips, and those were the ones that I was thinking of when I was thinking of $20 for $25. There's a lot of 1-cent components and 2-cent components and some 10-cent components on that board, and that can really add up. So we spent a long time trying to figure out how to fight our way down to anywhere near $25 or $35 for the one that we launched, which has Ethernet and more USB on it. Towards the end of the year, We actually had something we thought we could build at cost. And this was fantastic. And we thought about our 600,000 people, and we thought, well, most of those are rubberneckers. They don't actually want a Raspberry Pi. So what we'll do, we've got a brilliant business model. I just finished an MBA, so I knew all about business models. I thought, we've got a great business model. What we'll do is I'll scrape together some cash, and we scraped together $250,000 of capital to run this project. And that's enough to build 10,000 Raspberry Pis. And so what my business model was, great business model. We'll build 10,000 Raspberry Pis. We will put them on a website, like some sort of shop store thing. People will buy them. And then after a few months, we'll have run out of our 10,000 Raspberry Pis. And then we'll go and get the money that we got back, and we'll use them to buy some more, to build some more Raspberry Pis. That'd be great. And then we had a really unfortunate, but we were starting to get these danger signals. You know, the traffic to our website was creeping up, and the number of people on our forums was creeping up. And to keep people interested, this thing boots from an SD card, right? So we put an SD card image online for people to download, just to have a look at. Really buggy early beta software, bit of firmware. I think you could boot it in QEMU. And we had 50,000 downloads of that. And that was the point where we realized that the pool of fans so hardcore, they would download a buggy alpha operating system for a computer that they didn't know when they were going to be able to get and that didn't exist yet was 50,000 people. And then we thought, you know, our 10,000 units might only last a week, you know, and it takes 3 months to make them, so we'd be screwed. And then we were very lucky because we found two companies in the UK, a company called Premier Farnell and a company called RS Components, and they trade out here as Newark and Allied, so two very large component distributors who shared our concern. They had their customers are engineers. They have an interest in there being a strong engineering base in our country. And so they had the same concerns as us. And because they had these concerns, they were prepared to help us out, not simply by distributing these things, but by manufacturing them for us. So they were prepared to provide the capital, they were prepared to provide the logistics and the first-line customer support. And so we turned ourselves in January of last year, in the 2 months before launch, we turned ourselves from a very capital-constrained little foundation that was trying to build things into an IP licensing company. So we own the design of the board and we own the brand, and we license those to these two companies, and they do the heavy lifting. And that's what enabled us to scale. We were very lucky we did this because we took 100,000 orders on the first day. So the answer to our question was 15 minutes, which was nice. So we're a year in. We've sold 1 million. We sold our millionth Raspberry Pi at some point last month. So I'll pretend that's what my number one stands for, shall I? There we go, it's a bit of theming. I'll pretend that number one stands for 1 million units sold. So it's been an incredible year. And one of the wonderful things about this year has been that for the first 6 months to a year of this project, our website largely documented stuff we were doing to get this device out the door. And then for the next 6 to 9 months, what it documented was what people like us were doing. People, you know, adults who already have a knowledge of computers are doing. One of the really wonderful things over the past 6 months, the past 3 to 6 months, is that the character of the submissions we get to our website is changing. So the character of the submissions we get is changing to be as much about what children are doing with the Pi as it is about what adults are doing with the Pi, and that's a really good sign. So I'm going to inflict on you. Can I have the slide deck back? 15-ish. Cool pictures of stuff that I wasn't able to keep myself to 15, but I'll be very quick. Projects people do with this. Things we never expected. One of the interesting things about the Pi is I'm a graphics hacker. I assume what people would write is graphics demos on this. Hardly anyone has written graphics demos, although if there are graphics hackers in the room, please do write graphics demos on the Pi and make me happy. But almost everything people have done with the Pi has been stuff that I wouldn't have seen coming. So one of the wonderful ones here, people have been using it as a great platform for doing music. This is a Moog-like, a free Moog-like digital analog synth that you can download called... The name has flown out of my brain, but it's out there. raspberrypisynthesizer.blogspot.com. Beer. There's an enormous overlap, not just... more overlap. So it turns out there's a big overlap between people who like computer programming and people who like beer. I didn't see that coming. You would not believe the number of people whose first reaction, Jesse challenged you to sort of think of something to do with your Raspberry Pi. You'd not believe the number of people who rise to that challenge by using it to control their brewery, whether that is a little home brewing station or like a proper microbrewery. And there is a thing called BrewPi. There is an open platform based on, I believe it's based on Python and Arduino and Raspberry Pi, a platform called BrewPi, which is a completely fully integrated microbrewery management system running on a Raspberry Pi. Cool. Photography, this one I enjoyed. There's this nice, if you want to get really crisp macro photos from your camera, there's this a process called focus stacking, where you step your camera towards the image and then stack up and then basically find the bits that are in focus in each image and combine them together. Usually you have to buy like a grand's worth of hardware to do this. This is a nice bit of focus stacking done using an old flatbed scanner and a Raspberry Pi and a camera. So that was quite cute. Games, yeah, there's an enormous retro gaming community around the Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi is just about powerful enough to emulate that era of computers that I grew up with and the first era of consoles that I complained about that destroyed the era of computers that I grew up with. Like this one, Super Nintendo, damn you. Okay, lighting. I just put this one in because this is incredibly cute. This is a lot of little paper. Well, I don't think they're paper. They must be plastic boats. On the Thames, there's a dock on the Thames. This is Canary Wharf, where a lot of our financial services are in the UK. And there's this a little ribbon of boats out there that you can. I think you can text to it, and it will change colour. But this sort of art installations seem to be a big thing with Raspberry Pi. This is my favourite one. It's Doctor Who and space and the Raspberry Pi all in one. There's a gentleman called Dave Aikman who I met for the first time on Thursday night, but I've known about him for a long time. He does a good line in putting cameras under weather balloons and sending them up to sort of 40 kilometers up and taking pictures. And he used to do this with little camcorders and digital still cameras. And about a year ago, just after launch, he started doing this with the Pi, and he's got these wonderful pictures of the Earth from 40 kilometers up, and then he does more and more incredible stuff, like sending up a little polystyrene TARDIS at the same time. What's wonderful about this, though, is this puts a space program within the budgetary reach of every primary school in the world. Right. And I defy any child. Maybe I'm a child of my time, but I defy any child not to be interested in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics when they can put a TARDIS in space. We have magazines, like in the 1980s, with type-in listings, like in the 1980s, type-in Python listings. And there's something about that loop where the internet is fantastic in a lot of ways. The web is fantastic in a lot of ways for helping people learn to program. I remember as a child having played Elite, I remember wanting to write a little 3D game, wanting to be able to draw lines. And I knew there was a thing called Bresnam's algorithm you could use to draw lines. And my father's a professor at the university in the UK, and so I had access to a university library. Could I find out what Bresnam's algorithm was? Could I? Hell. Now I find out Bresnam's algorithm by typing Bresnam's algorithm into Google. But one of the wonderful things about typing something in as opposed to downloading it from the web is there is some sort of feeling that it goes through your eyes and into your brain and out of your fingers, and somehow you own this more than something that you've just downloaded and run. And generally, when you type it in, you will make a mistake, and you will therefore you'll have a learning opportunity. I remember those learning opportunities in the 1980s. So we have, this is a free magazine called the Magpie. I'm hoping we're going to get print magazines. This one was an e-magazine for the first 8 issues. It comes out every month, but it's just transitioned to being a print mag that you can actually buy a subscription for. We have books. Those of you, I don't know if you have Haynes manuals over here. Yeah? Yeah. So my current car, so Haynes car manuals were a really big deal in the UK in the era when cars, when you opened the bonnet and it had something other than a big sheet of metal with a sticker on saying warranty void if open. Haynes have had to survive that transition. The way they've survived it is by producing, the Haynes manual for the space shuttle and the Haynes manual for a baby, and they've done a Haynes manual for the Raspberry Pi. So we are actually now starting to see an ecosystem of books appearing around the Pi, and that's just been really, really gratifying. We have at least one O'Reilly book, which is, you've made it. This one was cool. There's a programming language called Python. This guy has figured out how to get Python running in his desktop background, so you can give the focus to the desktop background and start typing Python. I just think this is pretty much as close as anyone has got to that primal boots to programming language experience that I talked about earlier, and I do think this is incredibly cute. Cases, we thought we were going to make 1,000 of these maybe, then 10,000. We didn't think we were going to make enough of these for it to be worth us designing any injection molds for cases, so we didn't do a case. What this has meant is that we have left a lot of value out in the ecosystem. There are a lot of people making cases for the Raspberry Pi, a lot of people getting nice little businesses together around making cases and accessories for the Pi. And they cover the cases you can get for a Raspberry Pi cover the entire gamut. They cover the entire market. This is the bottom end of the market because this is a PDF. And what you do is you print this one out onto the thickest paper you can get through your printer without jamming it. And then you fold it up and you've got a case. And it doesn't even catch fire, which is kind of cool. So I like the punnet. This one's cool. Legos. We had this idea we wanted to build a credit card size computer, and the idea of the credit card size is largely it's a way of driving our focus on being small, and B, it's easy to communicate. You say, it's a credit card size computer. Of course, it's not a credit card size computer because I didn't pay enough attention to the guy who was doing the board layout. My good friend Pete Lomas, also a trustee. And so it's about a mil off in each direction. But by some amazing magical fluke, both the X and Y dimensions of the board turn out to be a multiple of the Lego basis unit size, very, very closely. Yeah, that's a bit of luck. And so there's an enormous world of Lego cases. This case was designed by a Girl Scout called Biz in the UK. She's 11 years old, and she posted a tutorial on her website. And there's now a website in the UK where you can buy Lego kits, non-standard Lego kits. You can buy this because she designed it. She gets royalties on it, and because she's an 11-year-old girl, she takes those royalties in the form of Lego. So she's now, I think, got more Lego than me, just about. And then at the other end, Pibo, you showed that in a Pibo?
Yeah, that's my daughter.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, Jessie's daughter had an absolutely beautiful case for her Raspberry Pi. This is a Pibo. It's designed by the guy who designed our logo for us. It is a stack of bits of Perspex, and it really is, as you probably saw from Jessie's photograph, the most beautiful case for a computer that I've ever seen. We're starting to get some evidence that kids are learning to program on Raspberry Pis. This kid is called Mikey. He you can't see because it's off camera, but he is learning to program in Scratch, in MIT Scratch, which we run. We're spending a lot of the money at the moment on bringing performance on Scratch up to par on the Pi. So we had a really parochial worldview. We were thinking about trying to solve a little problem for Cambridge University. It turns out kids all over the UK want to learn to program. It turns out kids all over the world want to learn to program. These kids are in Uttar Pradesh in India, and you can actually see in the bottom left-hand corner that they really are using Scratch to learn to program. We get sent a lot of these pictures. Ooh, spoiled, I don't know. We get sent a lot of these pictures, and there have been some hard days during the development of the Raspberry Pi. There have been some very, very tough moments. And it's these sorts of pictures that cheer us up and keep us going, because it gives us some sort of indication that we might actually be accomplishing something with this little computer. We run Minecraft. I don't think I have more to say about that. I said there needed to be a hook. There needs to be a hook to get these computers into kids' lives. Apparently a lot of children enjoy playing Minecraft. Mojang have been incredibly helpful. They've done a port of their Pocket Edition of Minecraft Pocket Edition to the Pi called Minecraft Pi Edition. The wonderful thing about Minecraft Pi Edition is that the Minecraft process has a socket on the side of it you can bind to from pretty much any programming language. See if you can guess which one most people use. And you can issue text commands into it to interact with the world. And the wonderful thing about this is it gives kids a reason to program. Right, it gives you a reason to program. You want to build a house, you can be like brick, 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 like this. Or you can open the Python window, which I think you may be able to see in the background, and go for X in range 10, for Y in range 10, brick. And then you build a floor. And it's just, it's got that feeling of just very, very quick, very quick feedback. It gives the child something that's immediately useful to them, and it gives it to them quickly. Try to take over the world. What are we going to do tonight, Brain? So this is a wonderful map, and this was done by a guy called Ryan Walmsley, who was, I think, 14 at the time. It's a Google map hack, self-registration map hack, and it gives you some idea of where the pies are all going, or where the pies were going when I took the screenshot. You can see lots we're a little bit outside our Cambridge comfort zone here. So quite a few in the UK, quite a lot in North America. North America is now our largest, it's been our largest run rate market for the last 3 months. It is, as of last month, also has our largest installed base, which is fantastic, and what we would hope for, given how many of you there are. So there are little pockets of strength in South Africa and Australasia. I think we would like to sell a hell of a lot more of these in South America and a hell of a lot more of these in India. But we're getting there, and we've got plans for those. Starting with Wales, which is where I come from. When we first started to build the Raspberry Pi, we did what everyone did, which was to go to China to build it. We built it in China, and then a couple of months into our run, we got a call from Sony, who have a factory in South Wales, and they said, we think we can build the Pi at the price you need. And as of September last year, we've been building Pis in the UK at the same price that we could build them in Shenzhen. And that for me is a big deal, because I come from about 10 miles away from that factory. That's where I was born. South Wales has, like many areas that used to be the industrial heartland of the developed world, has enormous economic problems. And the ability, that we can build the world's cheapest general purpose computer at the appropriate cost in Wales is a really fantastic sign for all of us who worry about whether we're going to have a manufacturing industry in the developed world. That was a personal one that I really enjoyed. Four things about Python. 4 reasons why Python is important to us. Our name. I said our name. We get our name from Python, and I will spend the rest of my life defending my ability to spell the name of Python. But yeah, we owe you our name. We owe you our chip. So 2835, which is the Broadcom chip that I was on the design team for the GPU in 2835, we designed the whole damn thing using Python. When we were designing our shader, we designed our shader. I would love to give a talk about this at some point, maybe in a future year. But we designed the shader processors. We designed and verified the vast majority of the multimedia IP in our chip in Python, because it is 100 times quicker to do that, and then to port the result across to Verilog than it is to do the stuff in Verilog, because the tools are just better. We always have this idea, why are software tools so much better than hardware CAD tools? It's because programmers have to eat their own dog food, right? It's where ASIC engineers have to eat our dog food. Our software, Python and a number of other interpretive languages have given us the ability to bring into this fairly unusual space, this ARM Linux space, a vast body of very robust existing software, and have it run as well in our world as it does in the traditional x86 world. And finally, our teaching language. We support a lot of teaching languages. For young kids, we support languages like Logo and Scratch. We will always support C and C++ for people who want to get close to the metal. The wonderful thing for us about Python as a teaching language is it gives us a story we can tell children. We can say, learn this language in which hello world is print hello world, and you will be on a smooth curve that leads to the language that all of these companies use to program in. There will not be a discontinuity at any point between the moment where you sit down and write that 2-line program to spoof people in a computer store and the point where you're a professional software engineer. We think that's extremely important, because every time there's a step in the curve, people fall off the curve. And I'm very nearly done. 3 very quick things I'm thinking about at the moment. Those brackets and hello world, that's shorthand for, do we make Python run Python 2.7 or Python 3? Yes. We're going to have to make a choice at some point, fairly soon, I think. People are getting kind of confused, because we have things like Pygamers, I think only installed for one of them, and it's all horrible. But we will get there. PyPy, we're big fans of PyPy. I think it's a wonderful idea. I was a big user of Psycho back in the day. I think these tools are really important. One of the things, we don't have a lot of processing power on Raspberry Pi, and therefore we do spend a lot of effort on trying to squeeze as much as we can out of the platform we have. And PyPy is certainly, looking at the performance, PyPy looks like it's going to be a big part of our future. Finally, boot to Python. Yeah, I showed you the desktop thing. This thing floats around, this idea of having some mode trying to get back to that world in which you have to choose not to program. We did have, in 2008, at the point where we chose our foundation's name, we did have a device that booted to Python, and it continues to bump around in our heads. How are we going to do this? We haven't really. We've made a cheap, there's nothing educational about the Pi, it's just a cheap Linux box. We still wonder what the appropriate teaching environment for the Pi is. And we wonder whether it's any of our business. We wonder whether we should just let the community come up with that for us. So there we are. I think that's all I had. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for having me here. Do I have time to take a couple of questions, or? Okay, in that case, I will be loitering around here if anyone would like to come and have a chat afterwards. Please come visit our website, raspberrypi.org. Tell us what you did with your Raspberry Pis. Thank you.